Carried. Any conflicts of interest to declare? There being none, no public forum today. Any further announcements by yourself, Your Worship?
Just quickly, actually, I did also intend to say earlier, I hope everybody has a fabulous Labour weekend. I think it's been a pretty long haul, not just for us here at Council, but for the community at large over recent months. And I wish you a relaxing, enjoyable Labour weekend.
Thank you. No announcements by myself, and I'll call for any minor matters that are not on the agenda. There being none, we'll move into any announcements by management. No. Confirmation of minutes. So we'll move that the minutes of the future Napier Committee held on Thursday the 10th of September be taken as a true and accurate record of the meeting. I have a mover, Councillor Crown and Councillor Crystal. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. All right, item number 1, we have our councillor consent hearing delegations item, where we are introducing our new terms of reference for the hearings committee. So I'd like to welcome Rachel and Philip, who are here to present this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, kia ora koutou. I'm standing in for the reporting officer Luke Johnson, who's away today. I'll also be standing in for his later paper on the resource consents activity update. So this item, I'd like to introduce Phil Hindrop, who you've met before. Phil is an independent consultant from Strategy Planning, and we've asked Phil to come along and review our hearings terms of reference. And so I'm going to hand over to Phil, and he'll take you through this paper.
Thank you. Morning Chair, morning councillors, morning everyone. So as Rachel's outlined, Phil Hindrop, Director and Principal Planner of Strategy Planning in the Manawatu, and I was asked to undertake a review of the current terms of reference, or more holistically, the approach in which this council appoints commissioners to hear and determine resource consent applications. I'll just speak to a few key points in the paper. So on page 3 at the bottom there's a bit of a summary as to what the review entailed, but specifically the review did seek to achieve the following outcomes. It was to set a clearly understood and transparent process for whom the decision sits with when appointing commissioners. It was to ensure the process is robust and of sound legal understanding. It was to update the terms of reference if needed, to reflect any changes in the process as a result of this review. It was to consider the benefits, costs and risks of using councillors as hearing commissioners, to consider what opportunities may exist to grow the capability of yourselves, and to have yourself share in local decision making while retaining the use of independence where warranted, as well as establishing a set of criteria to be considered for every appointment that guides officers' recommendations and the final decision. And so a lot of the review documentation is attached as appendices A, B and C to this item. And there was a workshop held on the 17th of October that a number of you would have attended, where we went through that to, I guess, just set out in more detail exactly that approach and answer your questions. The outcomes of that have ultimately been incorporated into this paper. Fundamentally, the review was against best practice, and that's best practice reference material that the country shares in the practice of some local authorities that I did approach just to see how they do it, and my own experience, I guess, as a planning professional for 20 years and an RMA commissioner. And in summary, so there's the best practice, I guess, points listed there on page 4, but in summary, officers did consider the key takeaway really is the need to develop a clear set of guidance criteria to guide, inform and structure the decision-making process so that it's clear and clearly recorded. And that just provides a level of robustness and demonstrates that the committee has taken responsibility and ownership and has clearly followed that best adopted practice. Look, on the whole though, I just want to say that none of this means that this council hasn't been following best practice. In fact, it has, very, very much so. Largely, these things evolve. I think I made the point at the workshop that this council typically doesn't do many consent hearings, and so this thing can evolve quickly. And really what the findings have found is by just having a set of guidance criteria that I suppose the officers historically do, but at least it's documented for transparency purposes. Yourselves can see that, the community can see that if they so wish. Just really manages that risk that sits with these sort of things. And so over the page 5, review findings. Look, the key ones for me really are number 2, or bullet point 2, that the decision to appoint commissioners to make decisions should really sit with this committee. The 4th point down, the staff, when having first considered this, should, in my opinion, recommend to the hearings committee with the key reasons, referencing the guidance criteria, who should be appointed and why. The next one's really a key point. Consideration should be given to having a mixed hearings panel consisting of an experienced independent commissioner sitting with a councillor, where the opportunity presents itself. And that's because these things, as some of you will know, can be quite onerous. They need to be legally robust, and with all respect to yourselves, they do take some time getting used to sort of writing them in a particular way. So having someone sitting next to you who sort of does this, if I was doing some home renos, I'd like to have a builder there sort of guiding me, if that makes sense. And the only other real key point was that all decisions on that are made should be made by the committee or by the hearings commissioners who are hearing that decision, and not so much staff of the council perhaps. And so overall, the review found that the correct structure and delegations are in place currently to appoint commissioners. Really, it just needs to be a tighter process. And so the terms of reference attached, and I think they are attached as Appendix E, not Appendix B as the front cover says. I'll just clarify that. Have been amended to incorporate the guidance criteria that was identified through the review for the appointment of commissioners and independents, and also includes the requirement to consider pairing a councillor with an independent commissioner where that opportunity presents itself. So the recommendation is really to receive the report done by myself and to approve those changes in the updated terms of reference. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Philip. Just a practical question from myself. So at this stage that the hearings committee is now going to start receiving reports with recommendations from staff on appointments of independent commissioners, would you see in that same paper, obviously there'd be a formality around the hearings committee giving that delegation to those independent commissioners as well, which is something that I think you identified in your report we don't currently do?
Through Chair. Well, yes, I think as long as, and there's numerous ways to do this, as long as it's just clearly stated that the appointment of that commissioner or those commissioners is done so under delegated authority, section 34A I think it is, then that takes care of that. So whether you do it as a letter or a formal paper is something that yourselves could potentially work out.
Yeah, and just bearing in mind this is something new for our staff, the preparation of these reports, have you got some templates or some guidance that you can provide our staff when they are preparing that first paper that can help them through that?
Yes, certainly can track something down or develop something alongside them. Yep.
I think that'd be helpful, thank you. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Boak.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just through you, there was a lot of talk in the pre-election stage from many parties about review and revision of the RMA, and I'm wondering, I know this is sort of a political question, I don't know if it's on the agenda for the current government to revise and review and change the RMA, but what I'm asking is this terms of reference sort of robust and flexible enough to weather any proposed or possible changes to the legislation?
Happy to chip in.
Yeah, go for it, Stuart. Yeah.
I think that that's a big question as to what will happen, and very interested myself. But this terms of reference will stand up as long as any other change is consequential with the RMA. There'll be a lot of things that would need to change if the RMA was changed. So I think you can rest assured that this is fine for now. There's a lot of water to go under the bridge before anything of that magnitude happens, I would have thought.
I think just a note for staff, Councillor Bug, I think that's a really good question, that there's a lot of uncertainty around the RMA at the moment, and just noting that we have had that report released on the potential review or some recommendations of review. Perhaps that's something we could flag as a paper as an update to Council, the status of that report. So just noting that for staff, we might bring that back to the next future Napier committee. Was there a question? Councillor Brown.
It's not really a question, it's a very minor correction. We met on the 17th of September. The 17th of October was last Saturday, so just for the minutes.
Perfect. If we don't have any more questions, is there anyone who would like to move the recommendations? Her Worship, Mayor Wise, seconded by Councillor Brown. Did you wish to speak to the motion?
Through the chair, I'd just like to say that I think this is a really positive move forward. We, as commented by the presenter, do not have a significant number of hearings here at Napier City Council, but we do have a number of councillors, including myself, who are accredited commissioners and chairs, and it would be wonderful to have more opportunities for us to be involved in these hearings going forward and actually utilise those qualifications that we've all worked very hard to attain. So I think this is a great paper and recommendation and a great move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, did you wish to speak?
Just to add that I think it's great that we've reviewed and we have found that we don't have a massive risk, but it's good that we've identified that and we're looking to further reduce our risk, and that the recommendations are straightforward and not overly onerous in terms of documentation and appointing a commissioner.
Perfect. Thank you. If there's no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. And thank you, Phil, for all your work in that review. I found it really valuable, the discussions we had.
Thank you. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right. Moving on to item 2, which is our civic precinct framework. Which is our vision document for the development of the civic precinct. I'd like to invite Richard, who's going to speak. Fleur is on leave today, so Richard will present the paper for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, there is an error on page 41 around the Team Napier. It has the wrong te reo with it, so we'll fix that up in due course. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just some brief thoughts on this paper. The civic precinct framework gives us the framework to do some the next level of planning for a new library, the council administrative offices, and the governance facilities, chambers, customer service facilities, and any accompanying community partners, commercial spaces, and other activities, perhaps a regional council that have a good fit for the, I guess, civic precinct functions. And the framework itself was developed through some workshops with staff and stakeholders, and some of the stakeholders were the Friends of the Library, Mana Whenua Ministry of Justice, and the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. And the master plan or spatial plan for the site and its surrounds is really designed so it's kind of a value and principle base, and I'll just go through those. Expression or outstanding design that complements the city. So we're sort of noting here that this is a real opportunity to do something quite spectacular for our city. Expression of Māori heritage and presence. Expression of art. Expression of community leadership. Establishing a safe and inclusive place for everyone. Physical connectivity, multimodal transport and arrival. Flexible spaces that foster collaboration and cohabitation. Enhancing social connection, post-COVID. And economic stimulus. All the future buildings and the associated infrastructure and public spaces and activities will be required to come together and demonstrate that the overall principles are being met. And the master plan will have, as we were sort of hinting at above, creates hopefully a lot of opportunities for co-location and shared facilities. Currently, there's quite a lot of work going with the team to shortlist tenders to undertake the next steps, and we will look to commission consultants to begin that work prior to Christmas. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And just building on that introduction to set the scene of where we intend to go as a working group next, the tender process which is just closed, we will appoint a consultant to work on the master planning process for us, and I've given the team the date of August next year, by hopefully by then we will have a developed master plan that will be able to show the community around high level placements and spaces for the precinct. So we want to move reasonably quickly into a publicly available vision document for what we can expect to build in that precinct, and of course we note that that will be developed over a number of years to come afterwards, and council yourselves have already signalled that the library would be the first project in terms of cab off the rank in that space. So with that, I'd like to open up for any questions. Councillor Brown, followed by Councillor Simpson.
There was just a term that was new to me on page 23, or page 10 of the attachment, which was buildings surrounding the proposed civic precinct are generally human scale.
Could we just repeat that, sorry,
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Brown?
On top of page 23, or page 10 of the attachment, it says buildings surrounding the proposed civic precinct are generally human scale. And I was just interested in, could you expand on what human scale means?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to welcome our George. What's your formal title, George? Is it landscape?
Urban Design Lead.
Urban Design Lead. Thank you, Georgina.
Through you, Madam Chair. Human scale refers to...
Yeah, pull it right close.
Human scale refers to the height of the building and the scale of that building in relation to a pedestrian. So we've got, in our CBD, we've got reasonably small scale buildings in comparison to larger cities. And the scale is predominantly around the civic precinct. We get up to 3 stories. We have also verandas, and so it makes people feel like they're not out of scale with the buildings. The buildings are actually are quite a comfortable place to be for if you're a pedestrian. So it's more to do with the built environment, how people feel in that space.
Could I ask a follow-up question, George? Is there a less jargon term for human scale that potentially we could use?
Not really. That's quite a typical one, unfortunately. But we can try and think of something.
Or maybe we could footnote it.
Yes, we can. We'll provide a definition.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Simpson, you had a question?
Through you, Madam Chair, of all times, my thingy has decided to update itself, so I've lost my question, but I think my question was along the lines of, at the moment, there are 2 major structures on that site. Can we just get a quick update on where we're at with the old civic building tender?
And just before you start that, just to governance staff, we have a couple of councillors whose iPads have gone out. If there are copies of the agenda, could Councillor Simpson and Councillor Mawson please have those? Thank you.
Through the chair, the 2 buildings that you're referring to are both, one of them, I guess, the library building, it hasn't been determined what the whether or not that needs to be demolished. And the civic building is all there bar the actual the contract going out, and the reason for that is that there was a bit of a change in commercial circumstance, really, where previously there was work done to have an external provider of a hotel, and they have that moment has now gone, predominantly because of COVID. Really, there's not the interest in developing that site. So with that, the demolition has been put on hold until we're certain of what we are going to do and we can time the finances accordingly.
And if I could just follow on from that, I think one of the key questions that the working group needs to make a recommendation to you about is the keeping of the library building itself or its potential demolition as well. So whether it would be strengthened and retrofitted or demolition and new build, that's still on the table for the library site. So a conversation, once that recommendation is made, if demolition was the choice, then you'd want to do that at the same time as the civic building, possibly not for efficiencies and cost, but certainly for management of site risk. So that's also something that's in the work and part of our reasoning around why that's still sitting on hold.
Can I make one further comment?
Yes, and then Councillor Simpson again.
One thing that's really important is that the master plan will still, it may not put things we think they are. So we really need to suspend judgment on what we think is going to happen, because that's the whole point of the master plan, is to work out some of the best things. So who knows exactly what the future destiny is of those buildings and compared with where we think the master plan would put the library or the offices. And that may be another reason to keep the powder dry a little bit in terms of demolition the building. It's quite a good one, isn't it? Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair. So to carry that discussion further, obviously we've recognised that the pace at which we are moving is affecting commercial activities in other premises nearby in the civic court environment. So obviously the longer this drags on, the more of a Achilles heel we're creating in that space and affecting private businesses that are trying to maintain foot traffic and other things. So do we have a time frame around when that recommended report might come back to council?
Yeah, so that would be wrapped up in the August next year. So by August next year, we plan on having a master plan to council, which will identify where those placeholders will go for those major items, being the civic and the library functions, and there's a range of other functions that will go into that master plan as well. And through that, if you accept that, and that will be done with community consultation as well as stakeholders and yourselves, that'll be a collaborative development process. If you accept that, that will have an outcome in terms of what goes first from a demolition perspective, or what stays.
But we may still not see action on that site till 22.
You could see action next year if the master plan was accepted.
Wow, it's taking a long time, isn't it?
Through the chair, I think one of the key things is that the council has been pretty clear to take the community alongside with them through this process, and that means that you can't really plan to do things before you've done that step. And then the actual, this part of the process is really important before you actually get down to the actual project making. And there's nothing really you can do about that. You have to stage it in that order, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. And I do think that even if you demolish the building, that doesn't help you with foot traffic or anything. That just demolishes the building. So it is not great for those other places. But what we do have in the meantime is we do have, for example, the council located partially in Dunvegan House, which is actually closer to some of those things like Civic Court, even in its current part. And I know that they do use that. So I think all is not lost in the meantime.
Thanks, Richard. I have a range of questions. We'll go Councillor Wright,
Mine's not a question, it's actually sort of a follow-on from Councillor Simpson, if you don't mind me butting in.
All right, if you can.
And it's actually around an action. I'm just wondering, in light of the fact we know that the businesses in that area are being impacted with the lack of council activity there, could we perhaps investigate, particularly through the summer months, providing some activities and things, utilising those spaces in a way to encourage more foot traffic there, to support those businesses. So an action note for our staff to investigate that.
Thank you. It's a good note. Councillor Wright, followed by Councillor Tapani.
Same question as the bishop side.
Okay.
Given that rightly the library is the number one priority moving forward, because we have already done a lot of work around the library strategy, we know that the library is going to go back in that site somewhere, and I guess the master plan will need to identify exactly where, although we initially said where the library was previously. Are you suggesting, one, that the master plan may change, that the library may not be exactly on that site? That question first.
If I could answer that, I think from my perspective, we've said the library will go back on that site, and when we define the site, I think we're talking about the precinct
civic
site.
precinct,
So
okay.
it will absolutely go back on the precinct site, whether it sits slightly to the left, slightly to the right, because we've got obviously some roading that we can make decisions around in there, slightly to the back or slightly more towards the seaward front. That is still up for exact placement.
Yeah.
Can I just add one point to that? The hotel not going on that site means that you have some other options.
Yeah, and I mean, the main thing that I guess we all have a concern about is the community expectation around the library and when we're going to get onto it. And I guess the great thing about this and the master plan that is to come means that we've got an opportunity to spend a bit more time to get it right. And it's not just about the library, but that is difficult. And as somebody who's a lover of our museum and understands how the library being in the museum is impacting on the potential growth and activity at the museum, as well as having a smaller library and that impact on our community, it is difficult to get to explain to people, I guess, why this is taking so long. So I guess that's the thing that we have to wrestle with as a council. We have to get the message out there of the excitement of that we're building this massive precinct that is going to see our community and service our community's civic needs well into the future. And it's almost a once in a lifetime opportunity really to do something quite amazing. But in the meantime, we have an affected museum and reduced library services to our community. So we need to acknowledge that, but we also need to sell the idea of what we are going to try and achieve on this site. So that's a big ask, and so yeah, that's my concern.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wright. I think that's a really, really good summary of how the community's feeling about this project. Those buildings have sat there now for a long time, vacant, and it feels like a long time to the community, but we all know in local government what feels like a long time to the community is sometimes a short time in terms of process. And I suppose the key message is that we are really excited about the opportunity on this space. You're a member of the working group, so you'll be aware that we're pulling people on and off the working group as their input is required in terms of stakeholders' engagement. And there are many birds that we can kill in this. We've got parking, we've got accessibility, we've got shared services potentially, we've got inner city living, we've got our civic precinct, so that's all your civic functions, we've got the housing of our staff, we've got our library functions, we've got events and community spaces, and a whole range of other co-locations with community groups. There is so much opportunity here, and so much of it fits very, very well with the kaupapa of our library, and all of the work that I acknowledge you had done in the previous council as well around that library strategy and what a future library looks like. And we just need to give that the 6 months that we're talking about into next year to get to the master plan. And then I think once we have something to put in front of our community as well to get their feedback, that will build that excitement as well. Councillor Price?
Just a question, Richard, you mentioned that pulling the civic building has no advantage. Would if you pulled it down and put a park in there, would that not create activity and ambience?
Yeah, I probably didn't phrase that well. I think it would be great if it wasn't there, because a building like that, it just deteriorates as well, and it's not going to get better, is it? That's certainly one a sort of a temporary part to it, but it would have to be, I guess, endorsed by the council to carry that funding through to demolish the site, in the knowledge that that is going to be a cost now. Yeah.
Just one more question to Chair, actually. Is there a chance of a paper being reasonably fast-tracked so we can move in that direction? Because I think that it would see that we're starting to work on the area, and I think it would create a lot of activity and ambience in the area if we got rid of it, because it's horrible.
I don't disagree with you, and I think at one of our working groups, Councillor Crystal had a good throwback to some of the work they did during the earthquake that was really relevant to that in terms of the feel of community that stuff is happening. So yeah, we'll take that away, and we'll come back to you with some options around the civic site.
Thank you.
So I had Councillor Tapani,
Mine's
and
a follow-on to that.
if you're happy to take Councillor Simpson's follow-on.
So my question would be, maybe part of that reporting would be looking at the disruption that would be caused if both buildings over time had to be demolished, whether demolishing one, then having a period of pause and then demolishing another, the impact that would have rather than holding
For 6 months.
Yeah, okay, and I think that's an important consideration around disruption, and that disruption, noise and traffic flow resulting to debris removal. So I think it's important that we consider that as part of any future discussion.
Yeah, thank you. We'll bring some options to council for discussion to start with, because there is, of course, the potential still on the table that the library building as it is would remain, be strengthened and retrofitted. Yeah, so that would be an unknown.
Thank you. Through you,
Councillor Tuffney.
Madam Chair. So mine are just minor questions really, guys. Really keen to see a strategy around how we can utilise this space while we go through this. Supportive of seeing the demolition carry on so that we've got at least an open field space to use around vibrancy. But the actual question I want to ask is, as a result of the delays, does that mean that the seawalls assets that are currently fixed to the Civic Centre will remain in place until we have a decision? I understand that there was a piece of work looking at removing pieces of that, but now that there's a delay, will those remain up there to add vibrancy to the city, or are we still looking to put some of that into storage?
Ms Henderson, do I remember that you were working on this project around the seawalls mural on the civic building?
We haven't come to a landing as yet.
No decision's been made, so I'd suggest it will stay until
That's a fair assumption.
the
Thank you.
spot is found for it. If there's any building owners out there who would like it, medium term, it is available.
A rather costly piece of art. So
Yeah, a real asset. Was there a question? All right, no further questions. Is there anyone who would like to? I'm happy to move from the chair, and seconded by Councillor Wright. I think I've spoken enough, Councillor Wright.
I think I have too.
Councillor Brown.
I'd just like to really commend the working group on the work that they've put into this. I loved reading it. I thought it was a great way forward. And what I really liked was the synergy between what the work we've recently done with the community in terms of pre-consultation for the LTP. So if you'd allow me a moment, the feedback that we got from the community was that they wanted street beautification, accessibility, vibrancy, safety, inclusion and acceptance and connection, more connection to nature and fun and vibrancy. And all of those things are captured in what you've put forward to us today. So I feel like we're really on track with our community and really pleased with what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Crystal.
I'd just like to say it's a privilege to be on this group. I think, as Councillor Wright and Deputy Mayor Brosnan have said, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and what we do here will be here for much longer than we are. So it's good to take our time to get it right, but we would like to see it as fast as we can.
Absolutely. There being no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item 3, the Cathedral Market for Waipu. So I'd like to invite Steph, who's going to present this paper to us, and that is on page 45 of our agendas. Welcome, Steph.
Morning. Waipu Cathedral are seeking approval for an exemption to the Trading in Public Places bylaw to run a one-day market fair. This will be held on Saturday the 21st of November from 10 till 3 and will also involve a road closure of Cathedral Lane to accommodate this market. Proceeds raised from the event are to assist funding the earthquake strengthening work that they need to do. The Cathedral have also applied to the Recovery Fund and a decision on this is pending approval. So this officer's recommendation is that a decision of council is made as the market is 2 days after the next council meeting scheduled for the 19th of November.
Okay. Thank you. Steph, do I have any questions? Councillor Bogue.
Yes, through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. That sounds like a great idea. But every Saturday there is a market, as you know, down in Clive Square, and I'm wondering if this is going to be competing with it, and how you feel about having the two markets on the same day.
Thanks, Councillor. The market in Clive Square is predominantly food produce, and this particular market is craft-based and commercial providers. And there is an element of children's activities there as well in terms of bouncy castles, face painting and so forth. So a different market in nature.
Okay, if there's... Councillor
Question
Tapane.
for clarity, please. Just for clarity, please. So at this stage, it's a one-off as opposed to our weekly market. So for the Cathedral, this is a one-off trial, is that right? No, they're not looking to do it on a weekly basis?
It's the first time they've run one and they'd like to do it on an annual basis if it's successful.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, there being no further questions, would anyone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Crystal and Councillor Mawson. So we're moving item A, that we approve them to operate the market within Cathedral Lane on the 21st of November, where the trading of goods and services will occur. We'll then move separately a decision of council. Do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Crystal?
I'd just like to say anything like this in town at the moment I think is a great thing for our city, and bringing people into town is a benefit to all businesses in town. So, and it's great that it's aimed at families and children. After last Saturday's event, the Nuit Blanc, the amount of children and families in town, it was awesome, and a lot of comments even from my 20-year-old sons it was great to see Napier doing things like this. So I think this can only be a positive.
Awesome, thank you. Councillor Mawson.
Just acknowledging the amazing work that the cathedral and so forth do in the community. I'm just looking at the dates and so forth, and just wondering if there was an opportunity to maybe make this decision of council now rather than the double debate, being that there is only 2 days, and just creating some certainty around that for them. And if we're all in agreement now with that, then that would obviously provide them with a little bit more certainty. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Councillor Mawson, I'll ask for a mover of that motion after we agree to the first.
Oh, thank you.
All right, if there's no further questions, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Do I have a mover for the decision of council? Councillor Wright and Councillor Simpson. All those in favour? Please say aye. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Steph. I'd like to welcome back Rachel, who is going to be presenting item 4 to us, the report on resource consent activity. Thank you, Rachel.
Hello again. Right, so this is our regular report to you on resource consent activity undertaken by council. This report is about those noteworthy or significant applications that we have that we'd like to inform you about. As a general update, I'd say the team are experiencing a bit of a slowdown over the last couple of weeks in terms of applications coming into council. However, the amount of pre-activity that's happening before an application is submitted to us is really high. So we're expecting not only a pre-Christmas rush, but a lot of that pre-activity coming to us over the next few weeks. So that's really encouraging. The planners tell me that it generally comes in on Christmas Eve. We do have a statutory stand down from the 19th of December to about the 11th of January. So once they get back from their holidays, then they'll be super busy. Right, so just moving on to the actual items, if I start with 121 Battery Road, which we...
Sorry, Rachel, could I just ask a question while you were talking about the numbers? Does our system allow us to capture those analytics in terms of number of applications received in a certain period?
Yeah, we've just developed a dashboard actually for our internal use, but so yes, we can pull those reports, but the dashboard will give us a real-time sort of view of that stuff, and that's still under development, but it's going to be quite powerful for us to understand and compare to, you know, same time last year, you know, that sort of stuff.
Perfect. The reason I ask is we obviously know that applications for consent are an indication of economic activity in the city, and I just wonder if it might be useful if we could perhaps see those. Do we see those in the quarterly report, the actual numbers of applications received?
You do. I'll let Richard.
Just a better indication is actually the building consent activity. So there's plenty of building that happens without a resource consent, and those values are actually given to the council from quarterly, I think.
Quarterly.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so on to the items. 121 Battery Road, we call laneways. The update in the report we had for you that there was a Section 92 request for further information. I can now advise that that request has been satisfied by the applicant, and a decision on that consent is not far away. Moving to 262 Emerson Street, or the Provincial Hotel. There's not much of an update on this. We're still awaiting Heritage New Zealand's sign-off, which we believe is imminent. They are affected party, and until we can progress that application, we need that sign-off. '72 West Quay in Ahuriri, it's a mixed-use development. Where we're at with this is not much further update other than say that we're progressing towards a decision. The council have been working with the applicant on design issues and together with our urban design team, and those things just need to be worked through before we can progress the consent. 16 and 38 Willowbank Ave. This is now a notified consent, notified application, I should say. All submissions have been received. There is a Section 92, additional Section 92 request for information that has gone to the applicant following receipt of those submissions. The submissions raise some further information that council would like to understand from the applicant, and so that's out at the moment. And once that Section 92 is notified and the applicant is happy to proceed, then a date will be set for a hearing. At this point, the applicant has elected an independent commissioner to hear this matter.
Sorry, what was that last sentence? I missed that, Rachel.
Oh, that the applicant has elected an independent commissioner to hear this matter.
So he's made the request under the Act?
Yes.
Thank you.
62 Raffles Street. This is additions and alterations to an existing building, multi-unit development, largely 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. So this application has now been approved by council. However, we've received an application for a variation to the consent, and that is seeking a change to the financial contributions. So we'll be working through that over the coming days. That is all I have to update you on. There is one other matter that hasn't come to council, but it's not a new application, and it's one that's been on hold for a while, and it relates to Carlisle Street Bayswater Vehicles, the site there. This is quite a comprehensive site redevelopment application. It's been on hold for some time while the parties consulted with Mana Whenua, and that approval has now been provided, so we are looking to progress this application.
So we have a couple of questions. Councillor Tapane, if you could use your mic.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. So great to hear about Bayswater and the Mana Whenua progression in that space. So their consent has achieved the necessary environmental impacts and cultural impacts confidence of the iwi group?
Yes.
Cool, thank you.
That report is available publicly?
The application is available. I'm not sure about the iwi report, but
okay. I know that was of particular interest to Councillor Tapane, so would you mind investigating if that's available for release?
Please.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Price.
Just in relation to the provincial building down, do Heritage New Zealand have any requirement for time limits to come back with answers?
Which building are you referring to?
The provincial building,
right.
Emerson Street, 262, was it?
No, I don't believe there's any time limits. I'm not a planner, I'm not an expert in the RMA, but I don't believe that there's any time limits. These issues have to be worked through with the affected parties, and Heritage New Zealand is considered an affected party under the RMA.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no further questions, I'll ask for a mover for the paper. Councillor Mawson and Councillor Wright. Do either of you wish to speak? No? No one else? Right. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
We then have our next item, minutes of the Hiratonga Plains Urban Development Strategy Implementation Working Group, the HBUDS IWG. Just a number of letters in that title. So, are there any questions on this paper? Councillor Bogue.
It does say in the minutes that, I've just lost it off my page, but that the group, the HBUDS group, is meeting again after the regional leaders meeting, and I'm wondering when are they going to meet again, and yes, when and where. Thank you.
Perhaps Your Worship could let us know.
Through the Chair, so we have had our mayoral forum at which this was further discussed in terms of the need for there to be a review of the existing HBUDS document, and from Napier City Council's perspective, at this point in time, we think it's premature to move forward with a regional spatial planning exercise. There's no legislation in place yet. It has simply been a suggestion or recommendation in the RMA reform review report, and we think that it's really important to actually establish what has worked well with the existing joint strategy with Hastings, and look at potentially how we can further develop that moving forward. We have not yet set a date for the HPUDS committee to reconvene, and just thinking of the time of year now, that may well not be until the new year.
Thank you. Any further questions? I'd like to ask for a mover. Councillor Crown and Councillor Tapane. Either of you wish to speak? All right. Right, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. I'd like to hand back over to Councillor Price.
Okay, could I have a mover to reconvene the Sustainable Napier meeting?